Very good afternoon. Thank you for being here in time. We are beginning the session 3, which is on troubled relationships. Panelists in this session include Syed Muhammad Mehar Ali Shah, Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jilani, and Ambassador Rafiuzzaman Siddiqui. I request all of them to please come on a stage. The session would be chaired by Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel, who is Chairperson, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Islamabad. So please come. So let me introduce our Chair Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel. He is a retired senior Pakistani diplomat and former high-ranking UN official. His diplomatic assignments included postings in Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, India, and Kenya, and positions at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Islamabad. He served as Deputy High Commissioner in New Delhi and High Commissioner to Kenya and Uganda, as well as permanent representative to the UN Environment Programme. He has written and lectured extensively on transboundary rivers in South Asia, Pakistan's water-related challenges, the Indus Waters Treaty, and climate change. He has participated in Track 2 dialogues between Pakistan and India and Afghanistan for promoting cooperation on water and climate issues. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Dear friends, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this. I am pleased to invite all of you to this third session of day 2 of the 75th anniversary conference of Pakistan Institute of International Affairs, which has already covered a lot of the areas of direct concern and relevance for Pakistan. In this session, we will be discussing Pakistan's relations with India, which has been the perennial multi-dimensional challenge for Pakistan's diplomacy literally from day one of the inception of Pakistan. We will be discussing the overall state of India-Pakistan relationship, and then the very important question of water. You know, the bulk of Pakistan's surface water comes from areas outside our frontiers. And the Indus, all the 6 rivers of the Indus, none of them originate in Pakistan's territories. So the safeguarding, ensuring access to the transboundary waters is an essential ingredient and component of Pakistan's security. We'll a discussion, a presentation on Pakistan's relations with our former second half, actually the larger second half of Pakistan, which became Bangladesh as a result of cataclysmic events in early 1970s. I have a truly impressive group of speakers, distinguished in their areas and well-versed with what they are going to talk about. And if you see the printed version of the program, with the approval of the speakers, I have carried out, I will introduce small adjustments because the Syed Mehar Ali Shah will be speaking on the Indus Water Treaty. Now, water issues, as I said, is vital for Pakistan, but it is one aspect and one dimension of Pakistan's multifaceted problems and issues with our immediate and larger neighboring country. So what's going to happen is that we will have Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Syed Jalil Abbas Jilani, my friend and colleague, and a truly gifted diplomat. He will give us an overall presentation on Pak-India relations, and I would also urge him to basically refer to the more recent years and then, of course, talk about the stalemate that has happened in our relations, and then try to answer the question which is implicit in the title. Are we, India and Pakistan, condemned to live in perpetual animosity and acrimony? Or is there a possibility of an improvement in our relations? And if so, how do we go about that? And now, what I'm going to do is I will not read out the detailed biodata of the speakers, but I'll only mention those aspects which are relevant to their presentation. Like Jalil Abbas Jilani is fully qualified to speak, to discuss India-Pakistan relations, because he has spent more than a decade dealing with India as director, as head of the India Directorate, as Director General of the South Asia and SAARC Division, and as Foreign Secretary. In both New Delhi and Islamabad, the Foreign Secretaries deal with the subject of relations with the other. So in India, it's the Indian Foreign Secretary who will interact with the High Commissioner of Pakistan on all aspects of India-Pakistan relations, and vice versa in Islamabad. So you have someone who has had direct exposure, direct contacts with India, with Indians, and with the issues on the India-Pakistan agenda. I will then be requesting, again, a dear friend, Syed Muhammad Mehar Ali Shah, who has been a Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Water Resources for quite some time, and has been involved as a professional water resource engineer with the designing, with the planning, and with the operations of water resource projects and schemes. And more relevant for his presentation today, he has doubled as the Pakistani Indus Commissioner. As you all know, the Indus Water Treaty provides for an institutional arrangement which is called the Permanent Indus Commission, PIC, comprising two commissioners, and the Indus Water Treaty specifically mentions that both countries should appoint people of outstanding expertise as their Indus commissioners. So he has been Indus Commissioner. He has dealt with some of the most contentious issues, which are basically the hydropower projects that India is allowed under the Indus Water Treaty to build on the western rivers, which are otherwise, you can call them the Pakistani rivers, because the three western rivers were given to Pakistan, except with some uses allowed to India, with again very stringent conditions. And the eastern rivers were given to India. This is the first time a basin was vivisected, was partitioned, was divided. Never before in history has a multi-river basin been so brutally divided, but that's a very long subject, and we'll take hours and hours to discuss. But I was just mentioning that Syed Mehar Shah has dealt with the very complex issue of Krishan Ganga, Kishan Ganga, and Ratle, which again both countries have agreed to submit for mediation and arbitration, which are the two external means of resolving issues if the bilateral method, which is the Indus Commission itself, does not manage to resolve the issue. And our third speaker is Rafiuzzaman Siddiqui. He is a professional diplomat, 32 long years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and various Pakistan missions. But again, what I'm going to do is to refer to what makes him qualified for this afternoon's discussion, and that is he has served twice as Counselor and as High Commissioner in the Pakistani High Commission in Dhaka. So you have this outstanding trio to deal with Pakistan's relations with what used to be the Indo-Pak subcontinent, and so I would request Syed Jalil Abbas Jilani to give his presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Absolute delight to be a part of this wonderful conference. My special thanks to Dr. Masuma Hassan and members of the very prestigious Pakistan Institute of Foreign Affairs for inviting us for this excellent conference. Are we destined to remain in perpetual hostility, Pakistan and India? History of Pakistan-India relations is certainly not a glorious one. We have had wars, we have had tensions, a history of broken promises, and a constant tendency to undermine each other at either bilaterally or at the international forums. There have been unresolved disputes since 1947, and the list of those disputes is also, rather than reducing with the passage of time, the list is, more and more items are being added to the list of disputes between our two countries. And this kind of a situation leads everyone. It is not only this particular forum which has posed this question to me, whether Pakistan and India would remain in perpetual hostility for times to come, or is there any possibility to have peace between our two countries? I have dealt with this issue, Pakistan-India issue, as the chairman, Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel Sahab has rightly pointed out. I have almost devoted half of my diplomatic career in looking after Pakistan-India relations. Of almost 40 years of my service, 20 years I spent looking after this particular relations. And I was also very closely associated with some of the major initiatives which had been taken by the leadership of both the countries in order to bring some stability in this relationship. I was also very closely associated with the 2003 to 2008 peace process that was followed by India and Pakistan. Prior to that peace process, relationship between our two countries was extremely tense. We had the Kargil conflict. We had the hijacking of the Indian airliner, for which the Indian side blamed Pakistan. Attack on the Indian Parliament of December 2000. Again, the Indian blamed Pakistan. And then we also witnessed the largest ever mobilization of Indian troops against Pakistan towards the end of 2001 to 2002. And then I was head of mission in India, and I was also declared persona non grata by India on 13th February 2003. And it appeared as if we have both Pakistan and India, we have reached a point of no return. But then something very dramatic happened. We followed the peace process between our two countries. And everything was so abrupt. So that leads me to conclude that peace between India and Pakistan is possible. But for peace between our two countries, there are certain elements which are required to be followed, or there are some important factors which need to be kept in mind. And one of the most important factor is the statesmanship and courage, boldness of the leadership. The second most important factor is endorsement of the initiative taken by the leadership, by the opposition parties. Because opposition plays a very, very important role in either becoming a part of any peace process or to undermine any peace process which has been initiated by the ruling party in both the countries. This is something which has happened most of the time. Third important factor is the endorsement by the media, because the media plays the most critical role in building public opinion in support of the peace process or in support of animosity between the two countries. And ladies and gentlemen, the fourth important element is the endorsement and support by the core constituencies. Core constituencies are people like us in the government, in the defense community, in the intelligence community, and these are the people who have to implement the vision of the leadership. The fifth, of course, is the business community. The business community also plays a very, very important role in building peace constituencies in both the countries. And lastly, the international community, particularly the United States of America and UK, they also play a very important role in any peace process between our two countries. And I'll take all these factors one by one. I mentioned about the high level of tension that existed between our two countries prior to the 2003 peace process. But then on 18th April 2003, former Indian Prime Minister, late Prime Minister Vajpayee, he went to the Indian occupied Kashmir, and while addressing a public gathering, he offered a hand of friendship towards Pakistan. And then he said something which was the most significant statement that he made. Prime Minister Vajpayee said, and I quote exactly the same words that he used, that we would like to resolve, India would like to resolve the Kashmir dispute in accordance with insaniyat, which is humanity, in accordance with jamhuriyat, which is in accordance with democracy, and thirdly, in accordance with Kashmiriyat, which is in accordance with Kashmiri aspirations. Now, you never expected the Indian Prime Minister to make this kind of a statement, particularly in an environment which was very charged environment in the Indian occupied Kashmir. And that basically, I would say that was seen very, very positive by everybody. I thought that I had just returned, as I said, as a persona non grata from India to Pakistan. I was holding the charge of Director General South Asia. I thought that there would be a negative reaction from the Indian media, from their opposition to this statement, but no. I think he had already kind of developed a consensus within the system, and that's how he was able to make that statement. The only comment that we got was positive commentary by the Indian media to this statement. So that is an important factor. Second important factor that I mentioned was endorsement by the opposition parties. I think his statement was welcomed by the opposition parties, and Prime Minister Vajpayee's statement in Indian occupied Kashmir was also responded to very, very positively by the Pakistani side, by the Pakistani president, and by all the political parties as well. The third important factor I mentioned about the media. Media, in the context of India and Pakistan, mostly comes up with negative stories. But then we are talking about a period in which media also played a supportive role and negative stories in support of the peace process. Core constituencies, and let me tell you that I have been a part of the core constituency, a civil servant, part of the decision-making processes. But then we people have tremendous ability to sabotage anything that is not to our liking. But then the core constituencies also played a very supportive role. We implemented the vision of the leadership. And then, of course, the business community. I remember that during the high level of tension between our two countries, I was in Delhi and I had invited Mr. Amit Mitra, who was the president of Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I asked him, I said that how did he look at the situation? And he said that the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as all the state chambers, have written a joint petition to the federal government that this continued tension between Pakistan and India since 1999 is having a devastating impact on the economy of India. The Indian economy, which had registered a growth of 6 to 7% in the past, had begun to come down. And by the time the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, they had written to the federal government, it had come down to 4%. So their role was also crucial. And then United States of America and UK also played I would say that a critical role in the sense that they engaged in shuttle diplomacy between the two countries and they remained involved with the process throughout its duration. What was the peace process? We followed a three-track approach. One was the back channel approach, whereby things were being discussed at the back channel level. Second was the confidence building measures track. And the third was the substantive dialogue that was happening at the official level. Between the two countries, at the height of tension, they were very important in creating a conducive atmosphere. We agreed on Kashmir bus service in order to bring the Kashmiris from both two parts of Kashmir, divided parts, together. Muzaffarabad, Srinagar bus service was started. Poonch, Rawalakot bus service was started. Truck service to promote trade between parts of Kashmir, that was also initiated. And mind you, the bus services which were introduced without passports and visas. They were without passports and visas to maintain the disputed Kashmir, because Indians insisted that it has to be the same visa arrangement that is on the crossing points, the internationally recognized crossing points, but we said that no, it has to be without passports and visa, and this is something that we were able to get it to agree. When I left India, the volume of trade between our two countries was just $250 million. But when the peace process started in beginning of 2004, January 2004, within a span of 3 years, the volume of trade went up from $250 million to 3. Similarly, we were making good progress on a whole range of issues. Kashmir-related CBMs, political enemies, they had been released. Kashmiris were actually co-opted in the peace process. We asked the Indian side to send the Kashmiris and the Indian occupied Kashmir to Pakistan to interact with the Pakistani leadership. They did that. We went to India to brief the Kashmiri leadership. We did that. We took their advice. We took them there, and then they were incorporated in the overall suggestions that we would make to the Indian side. Similarly, people-to-people contacts during the peace process, they were also intensified. In 1 year, if you look at the record of people who had visited both the countries from 2004 to 2008, every year Pakistan would issue about 100,000 visas to the Indians to visit Pakistan, and they included students, businessmen, members of the civil society, members of the divided families, etc., etc. And same was the case by the Indian government. They also issued about 100,000 visas to Pakistanis to visit India during that process. And there was a complete but unfortunately, and then on Siachen Glacier dispute, which was mentioned in an earlier session, again we made some good progress. As a matter of fact, we were very close to the resolution of the Siachen Glacier dispute, and I entirely agree with the question that was raised by Mr. Monis this morning, that Siachen Glacier is also contributing to climate woes of Pakistan because of this highest, having become the highest battleground in the world. It is contributing to the melting of the glacier. So accordingly, we were very happy that that issue was also being resolved. Mr. Shyam Saran, the former Indian Foreign Secretary, in his book, How India Sees the World, he has devoted a number of pages. He said that an agreement had been reached between the two countries, but unfortunately, it was sabotaged by the then Indian Army Chief, General J.J. Singh, at the last minute during the Cabinet Committee on Security. Similarly, we were discussing a resolution of the Sir Creek dispute. We were discussing resolution of the water issues between our two countries. And we were also discussing a resolution, an interim resolution of the Kashmir dispute based on a 4-point formula that had been worked out between the two countries. And again, since I was associated with that process very closely, and I can say it, that we were close to the resolution of the dispute. As a matter of fact, one day in 2007, we were called by the President to his office, just a select group of people who were associated with these issues. And he said that the Indian Prime Minister is likely to visit Pakistan by the end of this month, and that we are going to sign an agreement on Kashmir as well. So we started, as a matter of fact, started making preparations for the visit as well. But unfortunately, a number of domestic developments in Pakistan, including the judicial crisis, as well as the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack, that disrupted the process. These elements that I just mentioned, they are important, but then we need to look at the current situation. Unfortunately, Prime Minister Modi is not Prime Minister Vajpayee. Prime Minister Vajpayee had a totally different vision. Some of my colleagues sitting here may not agree with me, but I would say that that particular statement that he made, that was something that became a trigger for the peace process that we had followed subsequently. Modi, on the other hand, is certainly driven by an RSS ideology. He holds pathological hatred for Pakistan and the Muslims, and the kind of treatment that is being meted out to the Indian Muslims, the people of Kashmir, as well as the aggressive posture that he has adopted vis-a-vis Pakistan, one does not expect things to improve at this stage. There is polarization, political polarization in both the countries. So accordingly, and thirdly, I think the media has also become very hostile, and I am referring to the Indian media in particular. So that's the guide. So peace is possible, provided you have those elements that I mentioned earlier, they are in place. What are the lessons that one can draw from that peace process? Number one lesson that we can draw from the peace process, and this is not only for Pakistan, this is also for India as well, and that is that visionary leadership can change the course of history. The course of history between Pakistan and India, whereby both the countries, they followed a wooden-headed approach to address their respective concerns, that was being replaced by a vision by a vision which can be termed as a problem-solving vision. Secondly, the most important lesson that we can draw is that you have to adopt a problem-solving approach. Otherwise, we will remain in that groove for the rest of our life. We have already passed 75 years in this acrimony, in this tension, and obviously, we would not like ourselves or the next generations to be consumed by the same kind of a tension that has existed between our two countries. And thirdly, I think it's extremely important that we need to it should be you can't really impose solutions on the other side. A solution, the important lesson is that a solution would be a lasting solution to any problem that exists between Pakistan and India. If it is accepted by all the parties, it should be accepted by India, it should be accepted by Pakistan. And also, in this particular case, the most important issue for us is certainly the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. And the people of Kashmir, certainly it should be acceptable to them as well. And fourthly, I think it is extremely important that we try and develop a national consensus in support of the peace process. A mention was made about the trade between our two countries, and again I would say that in order to promote trade between our two countries, a national consensus is again of paramount importance. If we are able to do that, I think we can certainly build peace constituencies in both countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jalil Jilani, for this comprehensive tour d'horizon and the analytical framework that you presented, listing the prerequisites for a breakthrough and national consensus. The problem is we would need the same prerequisites in India. The prerequisites must apply to both the neighboring countries, and but we hope we'll have a discussion on that. And now I request Syed Mehar Ali Shah to discuss the Indus Water Treaty. The title is Implementing the Indus Water Treaty, and that has been Pakistan's standard position that we want the effective and complete implementation of the Indus Water Treaty.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very good afternoon, Excellency Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel and the distinguished panelists, Ambassador Masuma, and all the distinguished guests and the organizers of this conference. I'm honored to share my views on the implementing of the Indus Waters Treaty 1960 as Pakistan Commissioner for Indus Waters, particularly after having a thoughtful speech by the Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jilani. So indeed, my presentation will be, concluded on the recipe which has been shared by Ambassador Jilani, which will make the peace possible between the two states. I would like to start my presentation. So there are 28 slides. The contents of the presentation include a brief overview of the Indus Basin, followed by the Indus Waters Treaty 1960 in itself, which has been prepared in the form of 15 brief slides, followed by the India being a country which is consistently benefiting from the Indus Waters Treaty, how India is benefiting from the Indus Waters Treaty we need to see, followed by the India's approach to implement the treaty, how Pakistan feels that India circumvents the provisions of the treaty to the detriment of Pakistan, and what next. So, ladies and gentlemen, Indus Basin is a basin, and by the way, the basin can be conceived as a sort of a funnel which receives water from multiple sources, upstream, and all the water from various sources get together and converge into a stream, which drains down, so at a disposal point. So in case of Indus Basin, the ultimate disposal or the terminal point of this basin is the Arabian Sea, and so Karachi, so right where we are. The total area of the Indus Basin is 1.16 million square kilometers, so which is equivalent in size of the Murray-Darling Basin. But when we compare the total water availability in the Indus Basin, so it is almost 6 times more as compared to the Murray-Darling Basin. So in this regard, we can say that Pakistan's Indus Basin has been bestowed by nature quite an ample amount of water. So far as the geographic distribution of the Indus Basin among the neighboring countries of Pakistan is concerned, so Pakistan shares 47% of the total area of Indus Basin, followed by India 39%, China 8%, and Afghanistan 6%. And the total water availability of the basin is almost 171 or 72 million acre feet. So million acre feet is a unit of volume of water, and you can imagine it by visualizing 1 acre piece of land flooded with 1 feet depth of water. So the volume of water which will be, on 1 acre of land with a depth of 1 feet will be called 1 acre feet of water. So in terms of million, we can understand that the long-term average of the total Indus Basin water yield per annum is 171 million acre-feet, out of which 137 million acre-feet comes from the western rivers. So those are the Indus, the Jhelum, and the Chenab. And 34 million acre-feet of water is contributed by the three eastern rivers, the Ravi, the Beas, and the Satluj. Next, please. Sorry, I have to do it. So this is the present infrastructure which our country has, so solely dependent on the waters of the three western rivers. In terms of water storage capacity, we have almost 13.4 million acre-feet of water, which we can store in Tarbela and Mangla reservoirs. And we have almost 10,000 megawatt of the hydropower generation capacity at various locations in the Indus Basin. Then we have 18 barrages, so which are the diversion structures which enables the natural river flow to divert it into the canals for irrigation purposes. And then we have almost 45 canal systems all across the country within the Indus Basin, followed by 12 inter-river link canals, which transfers the waters of the three western rivers into the three eastern rivers to irrigate the canal commands of those rivers. So I'll go through this slide very quickly. It is just a record of the average of 100 years, in which you can see so almost a century record of the water availability of the three western rivers. So you can see that it is always followed by a varying trend. So which you can see that we have the average years or good years, in which so the water is neither so high nor less. So these are demonstrated in orange histograms. And we have the dry years, so which have been shown on the slide in red, followed by the blue ones, so which are the flood years. So we can see that in any 6 years of span, so if we make an average of these 100 years, so we can find that there are almost 4 out of 6 are the normal years, and then there are extremes of dry and wet years, 1 each out of 6. And in terms of magnitude of water in these average dry and wet years, so 137 million acre feet, the red dotted line, the red dotted horizontal line is basically not only the average of 100 years, but it is also showing the trend that the volume of water per annum is neither increasing nor decreasing. It is a very important fact. In order to understand that even after having the Indus Waters Treaty, so far as the water availability in Pakistan is concerned, it is so neither increasing nor decreasing, but it is following the same pattern which we had before signing of the treaty. Next, please. I'm tuned with this phrase. And this is the seasonal variability. So we can imagine that out of a 365 days year, so almost 80% of water gets available in the basin, in its rivers, so around 100 days. So it is again a challenge that so when we have more water, so it does not necessarily mean that so there will be a demand to utilize that water. So we have to basically conserve the water, particularly in those days when we have available in ample quantities, to utilize it in the remaining days of the year when we don't have much water. The Indus Waters Treaty was signed again in this city on 19th of September 1960 by the then heads of states of both Pakistan and India, namely President Ayub Khan and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, being the plenipotentiaries of the two sovereign states. So this has been mentioned right after the preamble of the treaty, which means that both the sovereign states pledged that this treaty will be binding on both the states, and there is as such no unilateral statement given by any of the two states. So it is a treaty which was agreed upon in its totality and now is binding on both the sovereign states. There are 12 articles of this Indus Waters Treaty, which have been displayed on the screen, ranging from the provisions for the eastern and western rivers and exchange of data, and the arrangements during the transition period. So that was initial 10 years when this treaty was signed, so that Pakistan can develop its replacement works. And after that, India was allowed to stop the water of the three eastern rivers. And then there are 8 substantive annexures of this Indus Waters Treaty to further elaborate on the provisions of the previous 12 articles. Ladies and gentlemen, the main subjects which this treaty deals pertain to the river water rights of both the parties on the eastern and the western rivers, and of course the obligations owed to each other by both the states. Then the hydropower generation rights of India on the western rivers, particularly runoff river, as well as the storage projects. Agricultural uses of water, both by India and Pakistan on western and the eastern rivers. And then exchange of the river and canal flow data on reciprocal basis, supply of advanced information about extraordinary floods, maintenance of international drains, future cooperation between the parties, and the mechanisms of the settlement of disputes. So if we see the Article 2, so this pertains to the provisions regarding eastern rivers. I will not read out the whole text, but so as in the beginning, Ambassador Kakakhel has mentioned that, so according to the Indus Waters Treaty, the 3 eastern rivers, the Satluj, the Beas and the Ravi, the total water of these 3 eastern rivers were given to India for its exclusive use. And the interesting fact in this regard is that at the time of signing of the Indus Waters Treaty, the total water which was being utilized in India out of the eastern rivers was equivalent to 4 million acre feet out of 34. And in the areas which are now in Pakistan, so it was almost 12 million acre feet of water. So the remaining 18 million acre feet of water was the water which used to flow from these 3 eastern rivers and eventually escaped into Arabian Sea, and by virtue of which the delta area of the Indus and the ecosystem and biodiversity was, intact compared to the present day scenario. But this was part of the bargain. And then comes the Article 3, in which Pakistan's unrestricted use of the waters of the 3 western rivers was recognized in the treaty. Whereas India was also given certain rights, so you can see in the yellow patch, and those 4 uses pertain to domestic use, the non-consumptive use, agricultural use, and the generation of hydroelectric power. I will explain you briefly over here. Well, so when it comes to the agricultural use, so India has been allowed under the provisions of Annexure C to irrigate 1.34 million acres of land in the catchments of the 3 western rivers, out of which it was agreed by both the states that on the effective date of the treaty, that was the 1st of April of 1960, so there were 642,000 acres of land which were being irrigated by the waters of the 3 western rivers in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Followed by the additional area, so India was allowed to irrigate 701,000 additional area from the waters of the western rivers. Well, in terms of storage, it is almost 3.6 million acre feet of storage under the 3 specific categories provided in the treaty: the general storage, the power storage, and the flood storage within the respective drainage basins of the 3 western rivers. With regard to generation of hydroelectric on the western rivers, so Article 3.2d states in its Annexure D that the provision of this annexure shall apply with respect to the use by India of the waters of the western rivers for generation of hydroelectric power. But such use shall be unrestricted And storage works as defined in Annexure E shall be governed by the relevant provisions of Annexure E. Then comes the design criteria defined in the treaty, where India was allowed to construct and operate its hydropower projects. So there were very clear and elaborate constraints imposed on those designs pertaining to freeboard, pondage, outlets, below dead storage levels, spillways, and intakes. So these are the technical terms I would try to explain you on this sketch. Which is very important in this regard, that so there is a general perception that perhaps India cannot construct and operate the dams in the western rivers, but the fact is that India can construct and operate the projects for generation of hydroelectric power and also for storage of water. But those dams have to be in conformity with the criteria enshrined in the Indus Waters Treaty. So, in broader terms, you can see that so there is a red dotted horizontal line that is the minimum operating level. So India is not allowed to draw down the water in the reservoir below this red dotted line. So you can see in this animation that this is something which is proscribed, that if India has a dam with a capacity to empty the water in the reservoir by virtue of providing the spillways over there at the bottom of the dam, then it is a very express violation of the treaty. And so this remain, all along Pakistan's observation on the designs of the hydropower projects of India, that the treaty, tries to put a bar on India, that where India's right to, take benefit of the water of the western rivers was recognized. So that was not at the cost of, change or alteration in the natural pattern of the river flows of the western rivers. Because if the natural pattern of the flow in the western rivers gets disturbed, so that creates a problem to feed the irrigation canals in Pakistan. Therefore, only small, alteration was allowed to India to fluctuate its reservoir water between these, very limited range of operation. So to the contrary, the justification which comes from Indian side is that they want these arrangements in the form of the spillways at the bottom of the gate in order to evacuate the sediments or to flush the sediments. So you can see the yellow front, that is the sediment delta, which gets deposited in the reservoirs, and it can be flushed down the dam if we can empty the reservoir. So this is something on which Pakistan objected on India's design and sought clarification from the Court of Arbitration in year 2013. And the drawdown, the limitation of the treaty on India to not to draw down the water in the reservoir was accepted by the Court of Arbitration in favor of Pakistan, and stopped India for all of its future projects to, construct and operate in a manner in which so the reservoir level would not go beyond the debt storage level. This was, the main, a brief overview of Pakistan's major concerns on the designs of the hydropower projects by India. And then, so there is a mechanism to settle the differences and disputes in the treaty, so that is provided in its Article 9. So in sequence, we can say that so initially the Permanent Indus Commission plays its role in terms of resolution of questions, and if it cannot, resolve by agreement, then so the treaty calls the questions as difference. And those differences are to be dealt with either by a third forum which is provided in the treaty, so which is called the neutral expert, or by the court of arbitration. So these are two parallel forums provided in the treaty. And the manner or the scheme of referral of a difference to a neutral expert or to a court of arbitration is in first instance dependent on the discretion of the two commissioners. If the aggrieved commissioner considers that the matter does not fall within the domain of the neutral expert, then the matter would be dealt with the provisions which pertain to the court of arbitration. And in case there is a difference between the two commissioners, like the aggrieved commissioner and the other commissioner, so where one commissioner has an opinion that the matter needs to be referred to the court of arbitration, and the other commissioner considers that this matter needs to be referred to the neutral expert, then invariably that difference will go to the neutral expert, and the neutral expert will determine that whether or not this, comes under his jurisdiction. And if he feels so that this matter does not come under his jurisdiction, so he will refer it back to the Permanent Indus Commission, and then Permanent Indus Commission will take it up to the Court of Arbitration. But this is only in such situation in which there is a difference between the two commissioners' opinion that the matter has to go either to the court or to the neutral expert. And here I would like to share with you that presently Pakistan has just come out of a long impasse which was created when Pakistan raised back in 2016 a dispute against India's two projects, Kishan Ganga and Ratle. So at that time, while Indian commissioner, followed by the secretary of the Ministry of Water Resources of India, were very categoric that the stage had not arisen to which the matter needs to be referred to any of the third forum. Whereas the Pakistani commissioner, my predecessor, had already, invoked Article 9 and declared the failure of the commission, by virtue of which the case was ripe to be referred to the third forum. And India did not differ with the opinion of the commissioner. Commissioner opined that the matter needs to go to the court of arbitration. So neither commissioner nor Indian secretary, differed with the opinion of Pakistan commissioner. And when Pakistan side filed its request for arbitration to move the court of arbitration, only then India also filed a parallel or a subsequent request to appoint the neutral expert, because so very interestingly, while learning the lessons from history, so we know that Pakistan has invoked twice the third forums. So first in 2005 and 6, in case of Baglihar, when Pakistan referred the matter to the neutral expert, followed by in 2010 and 11, when Pakistan invoked the Court of Arbitration. So it is our experience that the neutral expert forum, although is part of the treaty, has a limited scope and comprising only one person having a background of engineering without having a good understanding of the niceties of law. So therefore, the treaty being a delicate document, providing a fine balance between engineering and law, and so many other things, becomes a challenge for only an engineer to deal with and to do justice. And as a consequence, Pakistan got a decision in Baglihar, which was, so Pakistan strongly felt that that was not a just decision. And Pakistan was very vocal to raise her voice before the neutral expert that he had erred. But, so that was a party's voice at that time. But, the time is the test. And second time we went to the Court of Arbitration, and Court of Arbitration categorically declared the neutral expert's approach as a muddled approach. And this was a vindication of Pakistan's stance, which was very difficult, so immediately after having a bad decision from the neutral expert in Baglihar, to convince, so people back in Pakistan that so perhaps Pakistan's team did not fight its case well, and therefore it lost. But subsequently, so it was proven when the Court of Arbitration unanimously remarked in her determination or decision that the approach followed by the neutral expert was not, in conformity of the Indus Waters Treaty. So this is a mechanism, and I have made this schematic, but I will not go into the details. So these are basically the mechanism of Article 9, so which I just explained. So it provides the two distinct forums of neutral expert and the court of arbitration, and the manner in which these two forums get invoked. So the longer part of my presentation has been over now. And so so 3 more slides. Right, 2 to 3 minutes. So India is consistently benefiting from Indus Waters Treaty. So Pakistan has, as such, no concerns if India remains within its rights and fulfills its obligations. Presently, in terms of agriculture, so as I showed you, so out of 701,000 acres of the permitted land, India is now irrigating 145,000 acres of land from the waters of the 3 western rivers. Well, in terms of storage works, so 3.6 million acre feet storage is allowed to India on the western rivers, out of which it has just started its first storage project in Chenab Basin of the order of 88,000 acre feet, that is Pakaldal. And, hydroelectric generation, so there is as such no bar in terms of megawatts or its numbers, but then there are the design and operational constraints. The present India's installed capacity is almost 3,500 megawatts. This is a comparison of existing and the future, Indian hydroelectric plants on western rivers, so which the Office of Pakistan Commissioner for Indus Waters has just developed based on the information available from various sources. So you can see that so far the Chenab remains the main, area of focus where India has developed almost 30 projects, and 58% or 60% of the installed capacity, the existing installed capacity, lies in the Chenab Basin. But this pattern will go on further. Like, so if we see in terms of India's preparedness, so you can see that there are 14 projects of almost 3,300 megawatt, which are at advanced stages of implementation or being implemented, which can be completed by year 2030. And almost 89 or 90% lies again in Chenab Basin. So the India's approach to implement Indus Waters Treaty is that we feel, and we are on record, that the designs of the projects are made in violation of the treaty's design criteria, and India starts construction without informing Pakistan. So there are few examples of Chutak Wular Barrage. India does not provide data of the projects as per requirements of Article 7.2. And then India plans and constructs its projects in violation of the treaty, like Tulbul or Wular Barrage. Then India stalls on the discussions on the projects with the intent to bring these near completion before Pakistan can invoke the third forum. And India is unmindful in implementing the operational provisions of the treaty. So Article 7 is one provision. So the Article 7 is concerning the future cooperation. But the important thing is that how India circumvents, just, a glimpse. If you can see that the paragraph 9 of Annexure D requires India that India shall at least 6 months in advance of the beginning of construction of river works shall communicate to Pakistan about its future designs. So India always keep on waiting until the start of construction of river works, and just 6 months before, it shares the information. When India had already mobilized its contractor, the contracts have been awarded, the contractors have been mobilized, the contractor camps have been established, all the preliminary works have been completed. So this is how the other side is implementing the Indus Waters Treaty. And what next? Only 3 slides. If we see transboundary water security scenario vis-a-vis Indus Waters Treaty, so Article 12, the last article of this treaty, in its paragraph 4 states that the provision of this treaty or the provisions of this treaty as modified under the provisions of para 3 shall continue in force until terminated by a duly ratified treaty. So treaty cannot be abrogated unilaterally. It is, something which is binding. But again, it is something which is a plain and simple reading of the treaty. The rationality in Indo-Pak relations remain a question. So I felt not to write here something, but would definitely share that recently we saw the revocation of Article 370 and then making the Jammu and Kashmir as a union territory. Well, in the presence of the career diplomats, the veteran diplomats, so it is very important for me that the relationship between two sovereign states are governed primarily by having this underlying assumption that both the sovereign states will act in a rational manner. Now, so it becomes a challenge. The treaty does not touch upon the politics, but at the end of the day, the political relations govern. And this is a predicament for the Permanent Indus Commission and the two commissioners, I would say, that despite appreciating the technical constraints or despite appreciating the available technical solutions which can be adopted without causing any damage or loss to the envisaged benefits of the projects, of the Indian projects, I can candidly share with you that the Permanent Indus Commission has become just a debating club. And everything has to be, referred to the third forums, and the way these third forums are, invoked and constituted is again a challenge. And why this challenge? Because the background is, or the backdrop is, very serious in this regard. What we can do is, like, if I may call it, a countervailing strategy to create a shadow of future in favor of Pakistan. We need to put our house in order by optimal utilization of water resources made available by the treaty to Pakistan through integrated and strategic planning, and without any further delay. When Pakistan will have something to show in the international fraternity in terms of its economy, in terms of its foresightedness, perhaps that may so attract or compel our neighbor to behave in a manner in which it is required. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
This detailed presentation. I'll have some comments to make at the end of the discussion. But now Ambassador Rafiuzzaman Siddiqui, he will tell us how to mend our differences, how to improve our relations with Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, sir. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First, let me take this opportunity to thank Dr. Masuma Hassan, her team, for inviting me and providing me this platform to share my thoughts on mending fences with Bangladesh, which in my opinion is quite sensitive and a penetrating one. Let me at the very outset state that on my second assignment in Bangladesh, when I gone there as High Commissioner, many Bangladeshi friends whom I had known from my previous posting were very sincere in advising me that I should not expect any kind of rapprochement or understanding with their country as long as current dispensation is at the helm of affairs. So anyway, and I took their advice rather readily. In my view, there are basically two issues which remain the main impediment in mending. One being the apology issue, which goes back, of course, to 71, and about the killings, so-called killings, genocide, and the other being the Indian overarching influence in locking India's hands to have any kind of better or friendly relationships with Pakistan. So let's handle the apology issue first. From our point of view, the issue got settled way back in 1974 April when the tripartite agreement was signed between the foreign ministers of Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. The Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujib, in his very candid statement around that time, and I quote, that he wanted the people to forget the past and to make a fresh start, and Bangladeshis knew how to forgive. This statement was in fact the testimony of his desire to have a normal bilateral ties with Pakistan. The wisdom and sagacity displayed by the leadership of both Pakistan and Bangladesh in the early years in carrying forward the positive trajectory in relations of onto the positive trajectory provided a roadmap for the future generations in managing their geostrategic ties. The visit of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman to Lahore in February 74 to attend the Lahore summit, and later the visit of Prime Minister Bhutto to Dhaka were the beginning of a new era of understanding between our two countries. We may also not forget the role played by the East Bengal in creation of Pakistan. The All India Muslim League was also founded in Dhaka in 1906, and leaders like Khwaja Nazimuddin, Shahid Sohrawardi, and Maulvi Fazlul Haq, and many of the ilk played a critical role in the establishment of Pakistan. And interestingly, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was a student leader at that time, was also in the vanguard of Pakistan movement. This is rather a sad story that Awami League, forgetting the words of their leader, dumped it and started talking about apology issue. Dhaka's foreign policy mantra, friendship with all and malice with none, does not really fit into the case of Pakistan. As I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity of serving in Dhaka twice. And ladies and gentlemen, I must say, without an iota of doubt, that posting turned out to be my best and various postings that I have served abroad. And I quote our former Foreign Secretary and senior colleague, Ambassador Riaz Khokar, who had served there in Dhaka also, shares the same opinion. Just prior to my arrival in Dhaka, which was in October 2002, President Musharraf had paid a state visit to Bangladesh, and it had generated a great deal of goodwill there. Because when he went to the Martyrs Memorial and recorded his regrets over 71 issue, his statement created a lot of goodwill in Bangladesh. And he repeated the same at the banquet hosted in his honor by Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. Coming from a general, his words carried weight, and it came as glad tidings from Islamabad and was warmly received in Bangladesh. Earlier, President Ziaul Haq and Prime Minister Bhutto had made similar statements during their visits to Dhaka in the early 70s and 80s. However, things had dramatically changed when I returned to Dhaka as High Commissioner. Just before my departure to Dhaka, I recall vividly that Ambassador Tariq Fatmi warned me to be ready for a roller coaster ride in Bangladesh. And that turned out to be quite true. Politically and officially speaking, Dhaka was a very challenging assignment. There's no doubt about it. But I received a surfeit of goodwill and friendliness from my Bangladeshi friends and many civil servants. So in a way, it compensated the challenges that came in my way at Dhaka. Things had come to such a sorry pass that the octogenarian president, while receiving me for credentials, did not falter in raising some very, very unpleasant issues in our relations, and which put me in a doghouse. And then, because, presentation of credentials is generally an occasion when you do not bring any irritants, they are best avoided. But the president did not shy away in bringing those. Being High Commissioner of Pakistan, unlike my successor in Dhaka, I was not given any kind of access to the ministers, secretaries, or high-ups in the government, so I did not really get to hear much about apology directly from them. Nonetheless, many Bangladeshi friends, desirous of friendly ties with Pakistan, in private conversations would suggest that if I'm a government, may consider tendering an apology which in order to normalize their relations. My arguments on the lines of tripartite agreement and Sheikh Mujib's statement did not really cut much ice with them. Therefore, and our current High Commissioner, who is, unlike me, has been given access to all the ministers and secretaries, etc., has made our point abundantly clear with regard to apology issue, but somehow or the other, it keeps on popping up and floats on the surface. The question, therefore, arises how to resolve this very intractable issue. General assumption in Pakistan amongst the intellectuals, diplomats, political thinkers is that if at all we apologize to Bangladesh, then as quid pro quo, wouldn't it be a fitness of things to expect similar word or similar thing from Bangladesh, which I believe is quite difficult. Our former Foreign Secretary, Izaz Chaudhry, who was recently in Bangladesh to attend Bay of Bengal Forum, upon his return wrote an article in Dhaka, and he very wisely suggested that and I quote, that if the Pandora's box of fixing responsibility is opened, both nations will suffer memories without resolving the issue. A Pakistani movie which was released last year entitled Khel Khel Mein, it suggested that irrespective of which side made mistake, both Pakistan and Bangladesh should apologize to each other and move forward. I think it is easier said than done. Over the years, there is an acceptance in Pakistan for the wrongs done by us to the Bengalis. That there is a recognition at the government level also is a matter of great satisfaction. Pakistan has been trying since long to have normal bilateral ties, but unfortunately in vain. Listing of visa restrictions for Bangladeshis by us is a testimony of our desire to have stable, healthy, and brotherly relations with Bangladesh. Pakistan's friendly relation awaits decision from Dhaka, but unfortunately it's not coming. As regards our bilateral trade and commercial relations, there is also an understanding on our part that to enhance trade and economic ties with Bangladesh, whose economy of late is under strain and is also seen knocking the door of the IMF like Pakistan. Keeping in view the enormous populations of our two nations, there is a huge potential in taking our trade and commercial ties on a higher pedestal. The current volume of trade, approximately to the tune of about 1 billion, is really abysmal. Bangladesh is one of the top export destinations of Pakistan. Bangladesh can use our Gwadar port and CPEC for its export to Central Asia and imports made from their region. Need I say that it would be a win-win situation for both our nations. The trade figures over the years have seen some improvement despite political bitterness that comes in a way in retarding the economic ties between our two countries. The only silver lining, ladies and gentlemen, in our relation is that there exists a sizable Bangladeshi constituency which has no love lost for India, which is seen breathing down their necks and is exploiting its geographical and economic enormity. Indian domination is anathema to a common Bangladeshi on the street. Besides apology, India's ingress into every social, political, economic, and human sector of Bangladesh is another major stumbling block in our bilateral ties. Both Indians and Bangladeshis government recognize that there exists a glut of goodwill and friendly neighborhood for Pakistan, which is especially manifested when our two teams, cricket teams, clash. In event of Pakistan's win, you see rapturous scenes in Bangladesh and there is celebration, which leaves the detractors literally wringing their hands. But all is not well between New Delhi and Dhaka too. Bangladeshi government remains concerned over the maltreatment of its citizens by Indian border security forces. Sporadic killings of innocent Bangladeshi nationals at their hands is a cause of great angst for Dhaka. River issues, especially Teesta, remains a constant challenge. The Citizenship Amendment Act, which was promulgated in 2019, had and statements from Home Minister Amit Shah calling Bangladeshis, Bengalis living in Assam as cockroaches, had left Bangladeshis livid. Even the government, which is very, very friendly towards India, raised its alarm over the situation there. And it compelled, especially the intense pressure that emanated from the street, compelled it to raise the red flag and take the matter to New Delhi. The initial Indian efforts did not help in cooling down the tempers in Dhaka. And it was New Delhi which realizing the sensitivity of the situation and troublesome scenes in Bangladesh, had to rush and try to allay the anger in Dhaka, and they were successful in kind of, managing it. For India, any kind of amity and closeness with Pakistan is a no-go area. It is in its interest that the gulf between our two countries stayed widened and is never bridged. Since Awami League remains beholden to New Delhi, therefore it feels under compulsion to follow its dictation. In view of the foregoing, we must acknowledge that for Bangladesh, if it remains under the Indian clasp, any hope of having good relations with Bangladesh would amount to living in a cuckoo's land. Any number of superficial visits between the heads of state and government from Pakistan and Bangladesh, and on the sidelines of the international port, or exchange of long missives between them and exchange of gift of mangoes wouldn't do. Woefully, we do not really enjoy the best of relations with Dhaka, but at least some semblance of normalcy exists in our ties, and the doors of communication stay open through our diplomatic posts in Karachi, Islamabad, and Dhaka. Pakistan can drive some sense of relief that, notwithstanding India playing a role of a spoiler in our relation, has not succeeded in taking away the feeling of geniality which exists between our two peoples. As a utopian diplomat, I would like to say that perhaps, not in the foreseeable future, but one day we might, burying our hatchet, would live like friendly nations in the times to come. But ladies and gentlemen, while I'm speaking here about our relations with Dhaka, the political scene in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, is really heating up, and to the chagrin of Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. BNP, Khaleda's party, which was lying in dormant for the last decade or so, has suddenly woken up from its slumber and is seen to be challenging Hasina's government. Since the last couple of months, large number of delegations all over the country had come out against Hasina, demanding her resignation and wanting her that the next elections should be held by the caretaker arrangement. And the sequence of these events have culminated just 4 days ago in Dhaka, where according to reports, that more than 100 to 200,000 people had gathered in Dhaka. The BNP members had resigned, and there's a scene of complete anarchy on the roads. So much so that the United States, UN, and other 14 Western countries have raised the alarm, and they have concerned their concern over political climate in Dhaka. And this, since 2 days, I have been receiving lots of messages on my WhatsApp, especially by the Bangladeshis who are very favorably disposed toward Pakistan, expecting that things would change soon rather than late. So let's keep our finger crossed and hope that something nice would come out. I shouldn't be saying that, but I'm compelled to say that. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Which were extremely rich in terms of what they covered, and there isn't much for me probably in substantive terms to contribute, but I'd still like to go over just the broad contours of the three presentations, Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jilani, quite rightly, referred to the major issues, Jammu and Kashmir, and the relatively smaller issues, the Indian occupation of Siachen in 1984, the problem of maritime boundary, Sir Creek. There's also and the efforts that have been made over the years to try to promote confidence between the two countries and bring about a peaceful resolution or at least amelioration of the tensions that characterize our relationship. And he then identified, identified the main areas. He also talked about the 4-point formula that was evolved, that was agreed between the back channel emissaries, Tariq Aziz from Pakistan and Sati Lamba from India, and how the political change in Pakistan brought the positive impacts of that initiative to an abrupt end. And then, of course, the era of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Hindutva Prime Minister of India, who's basically, as The Economist said a week or so ago, has been running India like he was running Gujarat. So, hatred of India, of Muslims, under his watch, 2,000 Muslims were killed, and he totally dismissed the what had happened and the need for justice. So, Jalil Abbas Jilani, what he's done, his conceptual framework, I think is worth considering. He identified a few of the prerequisites. First is statesmanship and political will. The other is endorsement of the initiatives that the predecessor takes, who's then later on in the opposition. The role of media, the role of the business community, they can play a role, and he mentions his discussion with the Indian trading community, and he made a very special reference to Prime Minister Bajpai, his visit to Jammu and Kashmir, and his reference to the 3 principles of how he will approach a solution of the Kashmir problem. And that has been mentioned time and again by writers who support the accommodation of the legitimate aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. He spoke of Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat, and Kashmiriyat. He, of course, was also responsible for the famous initiative, the bus journey. And we have, I think, Ambassador Ashraf Jahangir Qazi may be sitting in our midst. When Bajpai met High Commissioner Qazi, he said, "Hum to Lahore gaye the, aap Kargil hame le gaye." So the sabotage of the positive initiatives by the military misadventure that Musharraf carried out, which is beautifully captured and discussed in Nasim Zahra's book on Kargil. Anyway, Ambassador Jalil Jilani's presentation was complete. The only two actors that he did not mention are the intelligence agencies and the role of non-state actors. I think both these actors have had a profoundly negative role in the relations between the two countries. As far as the present status of India-Pakistan relations, there is a stalemate since 2014 and since 2016, when India went out of the way after the Pulwama incident, which India blamed on Pakistan. India brought the only intergovernmental organization of South Asia, SAARC, to an end. And it not only boycotted the conference, but persuaded Bhutan and Bangladesh to also keep away. And I think future historians will remember Modi as the Prime Minister of India, who undid virtually decades of evolution of the only intergovernmental organization for economic cooperation in South Asia. At the moment, there is very little hope because, as I mentioned, the Prime Minister is not interested, and as Jalil Abbas Jilani mentioned, Modi's hatred for Muslims and his indifference or disregard or dislike for Pakistan under his watch, Indian ministers have been giving all kinds of threats. So we are in a situation, in a hopeless situation, and unless the things that Jalil Abbas Jilani mentioned, unless we have visionary leaders on both sides, unless we have the two parties in the two countries and the Kashmiris on board, no solution of India-Pakistan problems can be durable unless the people of Kashmir are on board. They were on board in the elaboration of the 4-point formula, and this has been emphasized by ex-Foreign Secretary Riaz Muhammad Khan in his writings. Also the need for national consensus in both India and Pakistan. That is the state of India-Pakistan relations. Unfortunately, whereas in the past, the United States often acted. I remember 1990 when Robert Gates came, when the situation was very tense between the two countries following the Kashmiri Intifada. And but now the Americans are so obsessed with the idea of enlisting India's support for their initiatives to counter China, that they seem unwilling to say anything that would not be acceptable to India or would be inconvenient to India. So that's where we are on India-Pakistan relations. I think as far as the Indus Water Treaty is concerned, Syed Mehar Shah talked about implementation. Unfortunately, the Indus Commissioner, the entire resources and energies of the two commissioners and the commission have been expended on dealing with the Indian hydropower projects. But the Indus Water Treaty, as Mehar Shah mentioned, also provides for exchange of data and information which can help in flood management. It also provides under Article 7 on mutually agreed cooperation. There has these two clauses. Well, on data and information, there has been sporadic exchange, but the Article 7 on cooperation has never been implemented. There has been a lot of work at the Track 2 level by experts who have pointed out the deficiencies in the Indus Water Treaty, which was negotiated in the 50s and signed in 1960. There are quite serious gaps in the Indus Water Treaty. It doesn't mention climate change because climate change was unheard of. It doesn't talk about the aquifer, the Indus aquifer, which is an essential part of the river, of the basin hydraulics. It doesn't talk about watershed management and the protection of the quality of water. There is also the question of my main worry is that because we only carried out a surgical operation on the rivers by basically dividing. We had partition of territories in 1947 and partition of rivers in 1960. Now, if as a result of climate change impacts, there is a reduction in water flows, and Pakistan is monitoring very diligently the quantities of water that flow in through the western rivers. How do we deal with the reduced flows? Because in Pakistan, the impression will gain strength that India has somehow diverted our water. So that is a major worry. And I think also, I would dare say that the Indus Commission's role can be enhanced. The Indians have to do much more in terms of the quality and speed, the quality of information that they provide to the Pakistani Indus Commissioner, and also the way quite often Syed Mehar Ali Shah would find that the details provided by the Indian side is not sufficient in terms of the annexure of the Indus Water Treaty. So there is Ashfaq Mahmood has done an excellent book called The Hydro Diplomacy, avoiding a water war between nuclear states. And he gives one of the chapters detailed recommendations on the data that both countries should exchange and provide to, particularly from India to Pakistan. There have been other writings also. A lot of work was done by Track 2, but those have remained unimplemented because India has not allowed even the experts to travel freely. I can tell you, as the chair of the Board of Governors of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, for our annual conference, we used to get between 15 to 20 Indian experts. This year, with a lot of effort, we got one, a junior representative official of the Indian Water Board. So unfortunately, India is not even allowing the non-governmental representatives, the civil society representatives, to remain in touch. So we've come to the end. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, happily, there is a total consensus in Pakistan. There has always been a consensus across the political divides in Pakistan on the need for doing everything that is possible to maintain, to establish and maintain excellent relations with Bangladesh. We've never allowed the ladies' provocative gestures, including, as Rafi was saying, almost the maltreatment of our high commissioners We've never allowed those to adversely impact our determination to seek the friendliest of terms with Bangladesh, and I think that is a sound policy. It is anchored in the national consensus, and we should maintain that. So it remains for me to thank our distinguished panelists and all of you. I don't know if should we keep some question answer. Okay. Yeah. I have Ali Taqir Sheikh. You have the floor. And I will then you, and I think you manage that. So be very, very, we should not have statements,
Sir,
we should have questions.
you have taken all the time, so therefore you kindly give me some time to speak to Abbas Jilani Sahab. Abbas Jilani Sahab was actually with a positive. My name is Agha Masood. I am a senior journalist and author of many books about South Asia. Sir, I would like to say, and I endorse your view, that Vajpayee was very much interested actually to develop good relations with Pakistan. He came to Lahore and he came to Minar-e-Pakistan. He wanted to show his sentiment that we accept Pakistan as an independent state. But after, when Babri Mosque incident took place and BJP came into power, and Narendra Modi from the last say 8, 9, 10 years, he's in power, and he has been trying actually to dismantle the relation between Pakistan and India, which was founded by Vajpayee. But and another thing, sir, I was a part of the delegation with Musharraf Saab in Delhi.
I remember
and I happened to speak to Mr. Vajpayee very briefly, and he said yes, he would like to have a good relations. But I tell you, sir, my comment is that with 370 of Article of the Kashmir and 35A, do you think there can be a good relation between India and Pakistan? And what the Indian media has been writing these days, they have been asking Amit Shah and the foreign minister, because this is the high time that you should attack Pakistan because of the differences in the political system of this country. So I don't think there can be any peace between India and Pakistan with all efforts, because the Americans and other, the big powers, they don't want to restrain India to dismantle or to destroy the relation with Pakistani people, and Indian people actually want with Pakistan. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, you could ask questions afterwards. But last question.
Last
please.
question?
Yes.
Mehar Ali Shah Sahab, I want to thank you, because since I came to this conference yesterday, everybody was giving a bad news and you have given us two. एक आपने ये कहा कि आपके इंडस वाटर कमिश्नर्स फोरम जो है इट्स अ डिबेटिंग सोसाइटी, और सेकंड आपने कहा द ओनली होप इज़ टू फिक्स आवर हाउस इन ऑर्डर. Both are not very optimistic statements. Since we have the company of two ambassadors, I wanted to ask all three of you, very short comment if you can. Joint Water Commission that Bangladesh and India have since 1972. It has signed several instruments of cooperation, 1975, 78, 98, 2004, and so on and so forth, in pursuance of Ganges Water Treaty, River Ganga pe jo treaty hai. Question is, are there any lessons from Bangladesh-India water relation management that are relevant for us and in order to make our commission's office more effective?
I entirely agree with you that the current dispensation in India, whatever kind of the understanding had been reached between the two countries, he has completely demolished that understanding. As a matter of fact, he is led a campaign to create a negative narrative about Pakistan, which is very, very dangerous, apart from the fact that he has taken this 2019 in action. You know, I am part of a Track 2 dialogue as well, and we had a meeting about 2 weeks ago, and one senior member of the BJP, who is one of the secretaries, deputy secretaries general, he said that we cannot talk to Pakistan for the resolution of these disputes because we have to first correct the wrongs of the history. the generations of invaders who came to Pakistan, to India, to subcontinent, and the kind of distortions that they created in the subcontinent, we have to correct those distortions, and only then we can sort of talk to Pakistan. That is why I said that those elements are important, but unfortunately, none of those elements that I mentioned in my, my remarks, they are currently present. तो मेरा तो remarks आप शाह साहब बता दीजिए.
For your question, you have been always very kind in terms of giving your intellectual input. First of all, I would like to make it correct on record that when I said about Permanent Indus Commission club, that was with a specific mention of the background.
Yes.
So that must be, mentioned whenever you like to quote that club, as said by. The other thing is the lessons learned, and then you said that. So when we say that we need to put our house in order, perhaps it is not optimistic. It is perhaps the optimism in this is that we are facing a challenge, and that challenge is also an opportunity for us to rise to the occasion, and enough has already been enough. Now we need to set the things right. So that was part of what I called a countervailing strategy, by using the shadow of the future to demonstrate to the world that look, so now we are out of slumber, and so we have started doing things right. So in which the government is already moving now. So after a disastrous hiatus of not paying attention in terms of construction of storage and improvement of water sector, now we have the policy. Now we have started worth billions of dollars projects for water conservation and other sectors. But having said that, coming to the joint commission or the lessons learned from the joint commission between India and Bangladesh. At least I, as a student of the transboundary water, do not see any motivation to, go by any of the patrons of that joint commission, because this is basically a treaty of surrender by Bangladesh in favor of India, when they have, they have constructed the Faraka barrage, and only 35,000 cubic of water has been allowed to flow to Bangladesh, and rest to keep the coast of the Calcutta wet. So what kind of treaty is it? So far as the treaty between Pakistan and India is concerned, even India say, which we do not, so by the way, accept, that 80% of the water of the Indus basin has been given to Pakistan, and they call it their generosity. So despite the fact that the facts are, so not that, and I also try to explain. So Pakistan-India Indus Water Treaty is not a bad document. It is a good document. I agree with the Ambassador Shafqat Kakakhel, that so this treaty does not mention about the aquifers. Yes, the aquifers are also important, and we can have another formal, instrument in terms of dealing with the aquifers and climate change. But this treaty in its present form is a very good document, both for India and Pakistan, provided both the countries implement it in its true letter and spirit, while keeping the politics aside. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that there are two features of the Indus Water Treaty that are the envy of lower riparians throughout the world. One is the elaborate dispute settlement mechanism, the three-tier bilateral mediation and arbitration, and the other is the Permanent Indus Commission. Contrary to what we have in the case of Indus Water Commission, the Indian-Bangladesh Commission can only meet with the approval of the Indians. The same is the case with the institutional arrangement with Nepal, although Nepal is an upper riparian. So we have the finest deal, and we were just lucky, and that that we have these two, the dispute settlement mechanism as well as this, but we should allow the dispute settlement mechanism to do a better job. I think we should avoid going to arbitration, which is extremely expensive. It costs $1 million going for arbitration, and also neutral expert. Efforts should be made. We should strengthen the Indus commissioners on both sides so that they are able to resolve the issues amicably at their level. Thank you.